Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. Today, we're going to be covering the topic of transitions, and we're very fortunate to have two guest speakers today, Carrie and Lorissa. Carrie Bruno is a registered nurse and IBCLC lactation consultant. She founded the Mama Coach 4 years ago, and they are now a team of 35 registered nurses and nurse practitioners providing education and support for Canadian families. Lorissa Zollinger is the Area Director for Kids and Company's Edmonton Centers. She has been working in the childcare field for 25 years and has extensive experience in training caregivers in all aspects of childcare, including helping children transition into group care environments and then graduate to grade school. If at any time you have questions, please feel free to ask. You can use both the question and answer functionality on the bottom middle section of your computer, as well as the chat function, and we will be checking both. And with that, over to you, Carrie.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm excited to talk about transitions today. I'm just gonna click and get organized here. So Christy gave me a great introduction, but like she said, we're a group of registered nurses and nurse practitioners. We're actually in Canada and in the US, and we are committed to making motherhood easier. All of our programs are based on science, so evidence-based research with a big dose of empathy, because we understand that parenting can be hard sometimes, and support. At the end of our time together, whether it's today on this webinar or if you're working with us one-on-one, our goal is to help parents feel confident about their own parenting styles and abilities. It's not about me or any other mama coach telling you what's the right way. It's about helping you meet your goals and what works for your family. So today, we want to talk about transitions. I feel like we're always transitioning our babies and our kids through something. So we're going to touch on ones related to daycare and to sleep today. So we're going to talk about dropping from 2 naps to 1, because that's a big one, because it usually coincides right with daycare, babies starting daycare, and then transitioning from the crib to the bed, which can be a big one and a game changer for families, as well as the transition to daycare in general. And Larissa is going to speak to that at the end. So let's start with 2 naps to 1. So usually, around that 7-month mark, 6-7 month mark, babies drop from 3 naps to 2. And that's a really beautiful time, because when babies drop to 2 naps, we find that their naps consolidate and they get a bit more predictable. They nap at 9 and they nap at 1 consistently. And you find your groove, and then all of a sudden, we need to transition them back to 1 nap a day. And this happens, it can happen as early as 9 months, although that's not very often. And some babies aren't ready until closer to 17 or 18 months. So there's the range, but I find in my practice that 13 to 15 months is a common time for babies to be ready to have 1 nap. And so how do you know if they're ready? So it's usually that one of their 2 naps, they just crush it. They want to sleep a long, long time for one of the nap. And the second nap, they may happily go in their crib, but you'll find they usually kind of just mess around and they play, they talk, they babble, maybe they cry, but they're very disinterested in the second nap. I usually find that the morning nap is usually the one that's very long, and then the afternoon one, they're not interested. So that's one of the ways that you might know that they're ready. Or they might still do both naps beautifully, and that's no problem, but all of a sudden their night sleep is really impacted. So maybe they're getting up at the crack of dawn all of a sudden, or maybe they're all of a sudden waking up in the night, or they're crying a lot at bedtime. And if you think about it, I always describe a child's sleep needs. It's a 24-hour cup, right? And so if all of a sudden they're filling too much of that cup with day sleep, of course night sleep's going to be impacted because they don't have enough sleep drive to stay asleep. So sometimes this causes the really early mornings because their little bodies have reached the amount of sleep that they need in that 24-hour period. And how we fix that night issue is by changing the daytime sleep. But the one question you need to ask yourself is, do they actually need to drop to one nap, or is it developmental? So what I mean by this is the minute you notice a sleep disruption, so if all of a sudden they're kind of messing around during that second nap, or they're having early mornings, don't that day drop to one nap, because right around the same time in their little lives, developmental milestones are also occurring. For example, depending on the age of the baby, maybe they're pulling themselves up, maybe they're starting to walk or stand, or maybe speech. Speech one usually comes around 18 months. Developmental milestones are proven to cause sleep disruption. And the reason why this disrupts sleep is because their little brains are consumed with learning that new skill. They spend more time in REM sleep, which is very light, rousable sleep, because that's where their brains process and learn to master whatever skill it is that they're working on. And I find it interesting because I get a lot of videos from clients or past clients when their baby's learning to walk. Almost in between each sleep cycle, he'll get up and walk the perimeter of the crib and then lay back down. And it's because they're consumed with learning and practicing. And so what happens with a developmental milestone is it looks like your baby forgot how to sleep, and this happens all the way through. And so what's important is that you recognize that this is what it is. And sometimes this is where sleep regressions happen, because as parents, we kind of interrupt the process of them learning and mastering that new skill, even in the nighttime. And we rush in and we offer a bottle or food or like breast milk, whatever it is, rocking soother, when actually they probably didn't need much help to begin with. They're just awake, and they might need some reassurance, but they'll settle back to sleep. Because what happens is babies meet that milestone, which is great. They check that one off their list, and then they're left with the sleep prop that we accidentally put in as parents because they were all of a sudden waking so much more frequently in the night. So it's just questioning yourself, is it a milestone, or is it actually time to drop the nap? So if he has been consistently doing that same behavior for almost 2 weeks, it is time probably to drop the nap. And it's the same for older children when they're ready to drop from one nap to none. And I can touch on that in a little bit, but same thing. If it's been happening for a couple weeks, it's usually time to make a change with the timing. So to drop with one nap, something that's really important is that your baby is going to need an earlier bedtime while she adjusts. And this can be a challenge when you're both working parents, and by the time you pick babe up and get home and make dinner, to have baby in bed at 6:30 is a big ask, but really important, and not forever, but probably for about 10 to 14 days as her body adjusts to that new circadian rhythm of having one nap per day. Her body has to learn to consolidate that one nap instead of splitting it into two. And then once she adjusts, bedtime still doesn't need to be any later than 7, all the way up to school age kids. Like my 7-year-old boy is fast asleep by 7 every night. And so when we're talking about the timing of one nap, what is the ideal time? and it's right around lunch, usually around 12:30. And this is, I think I can speak to Kids and Co schedule. That's typically when babies nap, is one nap right after lunch. A 2-hour nap is just fine, right? But it's great to have babies up by 3 p.m. To help preserve bedtime. And what I mean by this is if we let babies sleep late into the afternoon, closer to 4 or 4:30, they actually move into those deeper stages of sleep. This is really restorative sleep, like long-term restorative. And I always describe it as it's going to take longer to burn off. And so what happens is these babies struggle to go to bed in the evening. So if you give your baby a nap right after lunch, make sure she's up by 3-ish, you will have a baby that's ready to go down by 7 easily and sleep great through the night. Another thing that happens is if the nap is a little bit too late and they're sleeping late in the afternoon, you guys probably know what I'm talking about if you have a toddler. If you have a toddler who wakes up miserable from their nap after lunch, it's what we call sleep inertia. And this babe is just being woken in those deeper stages of sleep that usually happen later in the afternoon, and they're groggy. They're not waking in the lighter stages of sleep where it's easier to wake up and feel refreshed. It's like if you get woken in those dead hours of the night and you're in a deep sleep, it's hard to shake. It's the same with your toddler, but it's happening in the mid-afternoon. And the fix for that is to usually push the nap half an hour earlier, and you'll find that your toddler isn't as cranky when he wakes up from his nap. So babies do best if we gradually adjust to one nap. And so what I mean by this is if you decide to drop to one nap with your babe, you're going to need to feed her lunch early. And you'll start by napping her at 11 for a few days, then 11:30 for a few days, noon for a few days, with the goal of reaching around 12:30 for the nap. And just remember that during this process, bedtime needs to be earlier. And you will likely need to distract your babe to help her adjust to that new time, because remembering that her circadian rhythm is still set to want to have that nap in the morning. And so she's going to need some distraction and some help stretching to make it to that after lunch nap. If she's at daycare doing this, this is going to be easier because there's lots of stimulation, other children, and activities that will help her stretch to that afternoon nap only. So you need to give yourself and your baby some grace for a week or two, because it's going to take some time and she's going to be tired while she adjusts to that one nap. And again, I sound like a broken record, but if you can preserve that an early bedtime, like if you can really try to commit to that, it will help her, because long consolidated stretches in the night will make this whole transition easier, including daycare. And so planning quick meals, like crock pot meals, are my go-to if I want to have my babies in bed, and the rush of after school and picking kids up and after daycare. And it's hard because as parents, you miss your baby when you're at work and when they're in daycare. But I always tell parents, like, it's not quality time if you have a tired baby. And to be honest, after supper and before bedtime is the hardest part of the night, right? Because you're tired, your baby's tired. So put him to bed, do a solid routine with him, and then enjoy him in the morning, because babies are their best in the morning, right? And if you get up before your baby and you're ready and you can spend that hour or hour and a half with him before he goes to daycare, that's a great time to spend it versus at the end when everybody's exhausted. So how does this work with daycare? If your baby is on a 2 nap a day schedule, likely when you're starting Kids and Co, they're going to try to help you and stick with the routine that you're doing. So what might happen is it's going to take a little bit for your baby to transition to sleep at daycare, right? Because it's a new environment. And you might find that the after lunch nap is going better just because that's when daycare's environment is the most conducive for sleep. It's quiet, right? And some babies may struggle with that morning nap if they can hear the stimulation of the other kids. So some stuff that you can do to help with that if your babe's still on 2 naps is bring your baby Sleep Slack and Lovey from home. And if you buy a new extra set for daycare, try to use it for a couple weeks at home before you bring it there, because babies know if something's brand new and they want it to feel like it and have it smell like it smells. It needs to feel and smell like home. Okay. The other thing you can do is bring a portable sound machine for below their crib, right? You just want to make sure that it's not too loud and not too close to their ears. It needs to be a meter away from their ears and no louder than 50 decibels, just to protect their hearing. And then the other thing is communicate, right? Talk to Kids and Co. They're great and they want the best for your baby too. So how do you put your baby to sleep? What is your routine, and how can they as close as possible mimic that to make things more comfortable for your babe? So the other challenge is that usually the timing of parents returning to work and that baby thinking about dropping to 1 nap coincides. It's going to take some time for baby to adjust to sleeping at daycare. His naps might be short for a while, right? That's normal. Again, just focus on getting him as much night sleep as possible. And if 1 nap is going better than the other at daycare, then consider dropping 1 nap and following your baby's lead. If that after lunch nap is going the best, let him nap just after lunch. And then if your baby's still young, like just 12 months, and he's just in the process of transitioning, let him play catch up. That's what I call it. On the weekends, let your baby have 2 naps to catch up on some sleep. It will just, again, help you prevent that sleep debt that sometimes can accumulate and cause a really cranky, overtired baby. So that's the transition when it comes to naps. And now I want to speak about another big one. And I get a lot of questions about this, and it's crib to a bed. And developmentally, children are ready for a bed around 3 years of age. I find that this often happens a lot sooner, but I want everybody to know that moving your baby to a bed will not fix sleep problems. Usually it makes it worse unless they're sleeping great already, right? And if they're sleeping great already in a crib, I would not be in a rush to move them. Sometimes there's a 30-day honeymoon period, like you put your baby in like your 2-year-old in a bed and you high five because he slept all night. But it usually won't take long before younger children start to gain some confidence and they show up in your room in the middle of the night. And this is so exhausting because they don't have the developmental capacity to understand how to stay in bed, right? That comes closer to the age of 3. So reasons why people often move their baby from the crib to the bed, maybe a little bit on the young side, is if their babe's getting a younger sibling. And I would encourage you to be creative if this is the case, because if you move your toddler too soon, you could potentially have a newborn and a toddler that are both awake in the middle of the night. And referencing Canadian guidelines, we recommend rooming in with your newborn for the first 6 months of their life. So there isn't honestly a rush to have your crib set up in your newborn, your second baby's room. You can use a bassinet and keep him beside you and keep your toddler in the crib for another 6 months. And I'm telling you, 6 months is huge in terms of development, right? If he's only 2.5 will be a lot easier. Or if he's 2.5, 3 will be very easy to transition him from a crib to a bed. Plus, making that change on top of the change of a new baby can be a lot for a toddler to handle, and actually a lot for a mom to handle. But if your toddler's jumping out of bed, like, safety is a big reason to move your baby before they're developmentally ready to be in a bed, because he can't hurt himself, right? Obviously, if that's the case, we need to consider putting him in a bed. But first, you can try, get a sleep sack and get one, not the one with the snaps on their shoulders, but one with a zipper, and put it on backwards. Because usually these crib jumpers are quite stealth, right? And quite motivated to get out of their bed. And sometimes this happens at like 17 or 18 months, which is so hard. So zipping it up backwards kind of helps them. It makes it more of a challenge to get out of the sleep sack. And if they're in a sleep sack, it's harder to swing their legs over and climb out. The other trick I suggest is, quite often these days now, there's the convertible cribs, so the cribs that turn into a bed. So the back end of the crib that touches the wall is often higher than the front. So of course the front is easier to climb out of. I suggest to the parents, flip it around so that the higher end is facing outwards, because that can often buy you a lot more time, because they're just not tall enough to climb over. However, if that is not working and they're still climbing out, you're going to need to put them in a bed. And so my tricks for that is, it's going to take some time because they're young, right? And they don't understand how the rules around staying in a bed. And so I always tell parents, lift them in and out of their bed. Don't encourage them to do it themselves. Kind of help set that boundary, like call for mommy. Mommy will come and get you when you want out. Use a pool noodle under the sheets, under the side of the bed, where so that they don't roll out. I put it under the sheets to prevent falling. Plus, it's just an extra, trigger for them to stay in their bed. But they're young, remember. So even a crib rail, those work really well as well. Like a bed rail, sorry. Those work well too in terms of trying to keep them in the bed. And lastly, when they are young like this, you need to make their crib their room. So what I mean by that is, you need to remove all the toys and bolt all the furniture to the wall and make it essentially quite a boring space for them, so that they're not intrigued to get out of bed and start playing and messing around. And if it's a young baby like that, you're just going to have to, on repeat, have to walk him back to his room, And it's basically strictly business, right? Because the more you react, it doesn't matter if it's positive or negative attention that they're receiving. They just want something in the middle of the night. That's how toddlers work. So it's going to take some patience. And if you have more questions about that, I'm happy to answer them. But if they are 3, if you have made it till they are 3 and they are still in their crib, you can high five, because it's easier. Just developmentally, they understand the concept of positive reinforcement. So to be able to really reward them for this behavior of staying in their bed will work magically, versus a 2-year-old. that concept is foreign to them, and they're not quite ready for it. So that's why if it's a 2-year-old in a bed, you just need consistency. That's what they need, is just walk them back to their bed. It's bedtime. Walk them back to their bed with no reaction. However, if they're 3, a couple months before you decide you're going to move them to a bed, I like to give them a toddler pillow, and I place it on the one side of the crib every night, because you probably notice if you have a babe at home, they just roll all around the crib because it's a safe space and they know they're not going to fall out. So to try and kind of teach your baby to lay in one direction in the crib, in the bed, because that'll help, put the pillow in the crib for a couple months, just to teach them how to learn the one way. The second is involve them in the change. So build a routine chart. And what I mean by this is literally, it's just taping images to their wall in their bedroom, get them to help, and about the bedtime routine. So they have a bath, they brush their teeth, they put their jammies on, they read a book, they kiss mom goodnight, and then the magic 7 in the morning. And I get them to put a sticker every step, every night, because they want to feel included at 3, and they want that sense of independence, right? So letting them be involved is an important step. Then you need to teach them about the magic 7 so that they know when to wake up. And there's lots of different tools you can use to encourage your babe to wake up at the right time, because that's the challenge with a crib, with a bed. With a crib, we kind of helped them understand that when they woke up, we came to get them. But with a bed, they have kind of that newfound freedom. And so what I do is I just get parents to get a simple digital alarm clock, and I cover the last 2 digits with painter's tape, and I draw a 7 on it, so that when the 7 matches the 7, they can get up for the day. It's just really important, though, that you set them up for success. Night 1 of them doing this, make 7 actually 6:20, so that they see some success. Like set the clock wrong so that 7 is actually 6:20, and then you slowly push it back to the whatever time it is that you need them getting up, so that they understand that 7 is when they get up. The other thing you can do, you can use the grow clock. There's a bunch of different clocks that change from sun to moon, right? Or change colors, green to red, red to green, when they need to get up for the day. I find the grow clock complicated, but it does work. The only challenge with it is that it does emit a blue light, which can impact melatonin levels and cause more wake-ups in the night. Although I believe you can turn the brightness level down. So if you do have one of those, just make sure it's turned down as low as it can. And lastly, reinforce positive behaviors. Children love praise. Humans love praise, right? And so encourage them by reinforcing positive behavior. So if they stayed in their bed, when I'm first teaching them this, I'll build a bucket of treats, whether it's dollar store toys, or figure out what your child's currency is, and know that you will not have to reward them for sleeping in their bed till they go to university. It's about creating a habit with them. And so I'll reinforce that behavior for the first couple weeks with, like for example, I had a client a couple weeks ago, and her little girl loved Shopkins, and mom found on like a buy and sell site a whole set of them, and she put them in a tray, and every morning when this little girl met the goal of staying in her bed, mom would give her a Shopkin. And then we slowed it down over time, and how you kind of wean off the positive reinforcements is you start doing things for them that you were going to do anything anyway, like, oh, you're so awesome. Today we're going to the Rainbow Park down the street, and we're meeting a friend because I'm just so proud of you. You start to kind of up the ante, like, okay, now you're going to do this 3 nights, and I'm going to give you the Shopkin, or you're going to, you know, we're going to go for ice cream because you were anyway. It's just how you kind of slow it down. But it's an important part of the process. So if you do move your babe into a bed and you have a nighttime visitor, like middle of the night, and the baby's right in front of your face, like I said earlier, it's important to try not to react, because honestly, positive or negative will reinforce that behavior. They're just looking to see you in the night. Doesn't matter if you're frustrated. They just want to see you. So try to make it strictly business. Walk her back to her bed on repeat and pick one phrase, like, it's night time, mommy loves you. You know, it's night time, mommy loves you. That's it. And just know that bringing your toddler to bed because you're exhausted will quickly become habitual and reason for her to come every night. And this is often where we see those regressions, is during these transitions. And I completely understand it, because like, you're returning to work, you need to sleep, maybe you have another baby, and it's just easier to bring him in. And it's only a problem if it's a problem for you, but just know that setting those boundaries around that and being 100% consistent is the language that toddlers speak. So now I'm going to pass it over to Lorissa. And again, if you have any questions, we'll give you a chance to ask, and I'm happy to answer them at the end. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. So we'll just talk a little bit about that big transition. You're getting ready to take your little one into the daycare. And what does that look like? Can everybody hear me? Yeah.
Yes. Yep. You're good, Larissa.
Oh, okay, good. Sorry. Thanks. So I think one of the biggest things is to talk about it. And by not talking about it doesn't make the anxiety for yourself or your child less real. So getting them talking about it and talking about some of their feelings is the best thing that we can do, even if they're babies or infants. Still having you talk about what's up and coming, and just in a reassuring tone does help. If you know sign language or other ways that you can communicate with them, then that really helps as well. And with older children, it really is just, you know, getting them to talk to you about if they have concerns. Do they have any fears and expectations that they just want clarity on? And it kind of ties in with also checking it out. So going and seeing the program in advance. If you can't stop in and visit, can you just drive by? And then you begin to talk about that's going to be your new program that you're going to be going to. And then we're going to take a visit to the program and meet your teachers and see some new friends. And then you can even talk about what that day looks like for them. So what is your day going to look like when you get there? And so you're going to go in, you're going to meet your teachers, you're going to say hi to Miss Sally, and then you're going to see your friends, maybe play in the playground. So you get a little bit descriptive about what they're going to be doing, and then have a nap. And then at the end of the day, I'll be there to pick you up. And so as they experience that, and that actually happens throughout their day, it's going to help build their confidence and make them feel safe and know that, right, I can get through this. And at the end of the day, just like mommy or daddy said, they come and they're there for me and they pick me up. One of the best things, if you're preparing for that change in advance, then you're getting ready to start that separation and practice it, and get ready to leave your child there. And that's one of the great things about KidCo, is that they take the time to work with families and build that transition week prior to your first official start day. Your first day at work isn't your child's first day at daycare. That we work with you to really get you prepared and practice that separation. And that it starts with just brief periods. We're going to talk about that a little bit later and what that looks like. But that we work with you to make sure that you as a parent are prepared, and that we are helping you prepare your child as well for that big transition, that big new change in their life. And really important too, just like adults, that we cope better, our anxiety is lower, and that we have more patience for things that are happening when we feel well rested, and when we have the right, we're not hungry. And so making sure that when you're planning those transitions, that you're setting your child up in advance so that we make sure they've had a proper breakfast, that they've had a good sleep, that they've had some good naps. So even when you're planning those first couple days of practicing into it, that you're taking that time to make sure that they're that it's not during their nap time, that there's no reason why they'd be fussy, or that separation might cause a bit more anxiety. And so now you're ready for that day, and you want to make sure that one of the best things that you can do, and one of the if there's only one thing that I think really truly does help, is that we keep the goodbye as quick and confident as possible, and that we don't prolong it, and that we don't leave, like I said, we don't leave with that fanfare, that we tell your child that you're coming back, and that we're not going to make a big grandiose about leaving, that we just let the child know in advance that it's a quick goodbye. They can set the ritual, they can decide what that looks like. It could be that it could be a wave at the window, it could be a hug and a kiss, it could be a fist pump, that they decide how they're going to say the goodbye in advance, and then you just walk away and don't look back. And even if you've got the tears in your eyes, wait till you get to your car. It's so important that they see that you have that confidence and belief in them, that it's going to be okay, and that we're going to reassure them and trust that the caregivers are confident, they're skilled, they've got this. They know how to help your child stay calm and help them through it. And most times, very, very rarely do the crying and the tears last more than a few minutes after the parent walks out the door. It's more for you than it is, after you're gone, the reassurance from their caregivers, the distraction of all the toys and their friends calling them to play, like that just kind of takes over. And soon they're just immersed in their day, and they're going to be okay. So just trust in that. If you need to call the program, maybe 30 minutes after, just to check in and make sure the goodbye was okay, then go ahead and do that. And if by chance that your child is struggling and the crying does last a longer time, then work within the program, work with your caregivers to set up some different strategies. Then we would work with you and create different strategies and really make sure that we're being a little bit more open and sensitive to your child's specific needs that way. But most of the time, it really is only a few minutes, and just like Carrie had said before, it takes 1 to 2 weeks to set up that routine and pattern. And so just trust that, as long as you're consistent, that everything is going to be okay. Don't give a lot of promises, like false promises. Just follow through. You don't have to offer a lot. You don't need to promise rewards at the end of the day. If you have a great day, then this and that will happen. You just have to promise to be there and keep that commitment, that if you say, Mommy's picking you up today, then make sure it's Mommy that picks up. But if there's a change that happens at any time, then you just want to make sure and tell your child that it's Daddy's picking up today. It won't be Mommy. Or if you're running late, just give that information to the child ahead of time, whether it be calling the program so the caregiver can tell your child that, Mommy's running a bit late today. So, and then know at that time when it's normally your routine time to pick up, maybe the caregivers will just cue into that and make sure that there's an activity or something to keep your child busy until you do get there. So minimizing the television, the scary, children have enough to deal with that we don't have to add extra fears or extra anxiety, especially during a time of change. So you just really want to watch that and be mindful of that and make sure that we're keeping the routines and what they can handle within their norm, and then just transitioning and getting them ready and talking a lot about that upcoming change into the daycare world. Reassure your child that they'll be fine. Try not to give in to the crying, one more hug, Mommy, one more hug. Again, just really consistent, strong message that you've got this, you can handle this, that I believe in you, and you want to keep it really positive. Often, it's harder on the parent, like I said before, than it is on the child. So we want to just really make sure that they're not feeding off of our anxieties and our emotions, and that they're not reacting to what they're seeing us do. I have 2 children. I have a son, Josh. He's 17 now, and he's always had a harder time with trying new things. And so setting him up in advance and remaining positive and showing him all the positive things, and even giving him past experiences where he's been successful in trying new things and showing that that confidence is there is so important. And just praising the efforts of your child and making sure that they know that that you have that confidence and belief that no matter what, that they've got this and they have your support to get through it. And so just quickly, we'll talk on a few tips to help your child feel safe and secure. So these are just some key things to really remember as a parent, that we want to provide a consistent pattern. That, you know, we heard it before about just that importance of routine and setting expectations and setting limits lets children know what to expect, and that when this happens, then this happens. So just like getting up at 7 and then we go to, you know, we get ourselves dressed and then we have breakfast, then we have that little bit of time to spend with our mom and dads, and then we transition to that, you know, car ride to the daycare. And so the transitions are the same and they know what to expect. We go in the same door, we see the same people, and we transition into the room. And so that routine is so consistent and ready for them. And we set that limit because limits are there because we need to go to work. That's not an option. An option is, doesn't matter how much of the crying or the temper tantrum or anything that happens when we get to the daycare, nothing's going to change the routine and the fact that I have to get to work. And so we send that message that I know it's a hard day. I believe in you. You'll get through this. You're going to be okay. Why? Because you have wonderful caregivers who are here to support and love you. You've got great friends to play with. And so everything's going to be okay. So we're going to have our goodbye and we're going to walk out the door. And that routine is the same every day until they get to know it. Where we offer the choices now is where they can now decide. You offer the power. So the limit sets the expectation of we're going to daycare today. But now a little bit of the power that we can give the child is you can pick what you're going to wear. You can pick what shoes. You can pick your jacket or your backpack that you're going to bring. You can pick what you put in your backpack to bring. Or maybe there's a picture that you want to send along and the child can pick what picture of mommy and daddy or the family that they can take, or maybe it's a pet that's going to make them feel better. So we're going to let them, choose and take power where we can control it. But the outcome is what we still control. By setting that limit, that sets the outcome. So we want to make sure that we're doing that effectively. And then one of the greatest things that I really appreciate about Kids and Company is that we value that importance of supporting the family and getting them started in advance on that first day, that transition into daycare. And not only just the transition into daycare, but also the transition once they're in daycare from room to room. So what Kids and Company offers is that 5-day transition at no charge. And so that's, day one starts with the expectation of just coming in, meeting and greeting, getting to know the name of your teacher, see the environment. And like we talked about at the beginning, it gives you that conversation piece to have with your child. So remember when we saw the daycare today and you met your teacher, so soon you're going to get to go there and spend the whole day when mommy or daddy goes back to work. And so it gives you that dialogue to start talking about, and it gives the child something visual to be able to put all that to and help to just start easing and calming them down. And then you're going to gradually work through day 2, day 3, day 4, where you're just adding more time. And then by day 4 and day 5, you're actually leaving the child there first on day 4 for a short period of time, and then coming back, rewarding your child's success, and just showing them and building that confidence that I left, but I did come back for you. And that's going to happen every day. When I drop you off, I'm still coming back for you at the end of each day. And then on that last day of day 5, you even want to stretch it over the nap time so that you can see and you can feel safe and know. So that when your first day of work back into transitioning back into your work day, you already know and you've seen and you know what to expect, and you can see what your child is going to be doing. You can rest assured that you've met the caregivers, that you feel confident. And then when you talk about the child's day, just ask those key questions like, what did you play with? Where did you play? Did you go outside today? Ask those key questions and really get them talking and building, so that the next day, just like yesterday when you went and played at the park, today it's a nice day, so you'll get to go outside, and you start talking about it on your way in and just giving them that confidence, and just helping to ease them in, and they know what to expect for the day. So really just wanting that working relationship and helping you feel comfortable and secure and easing in. And then once your child's in the program, so now they're moving from, the toddler 1 to the toddler 2 room or to the preschool room, that same respect is given to your child, and that same, gentle transition in where they can, spend a bit of time in the next room and working with the caregivers, getting to know the new caregivers that are going to be looking after them, because that's a big change in their little world. They spent up to a good part of a year in a room, if not more, and now they're transitioning into a new room, new faces, and so that same care and respect is given. And so again, just setting that routine and talking to your child, even if it's during those transitions, are so important to help them through, and that you relay that confidence back to your child, that you believe in the daycare, that it's a safe, secure place for them to be, and that they're well looked after and well loved until you're able to come pick them up. So that's everything for me. If anybody has any questions, would love to answer any, and we'll turn it back over to Christy.
Thank you so much, Lorissa, and thank you, Carrie. That was absolutely fantastic. Does anyone have any questions? If you do, feel free to share them in either the Q&A function or the chat function. I don't see any right now, but while we're waiting just to see any come in, I just wanted to let everybody know that we will be hosting our next webinar on October 8th with Allison Schaefer, and we will be focusing on tips for potty training. So if you're interested in joining us for our next webinar, you can find all of the details to register on our corporate partner perks webpage. I'll just have one look here to see if we've got any questions that have come in. It doesn't look like it, so feel free to reach out to us if you think of any questions at a later date. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to Lorissa and Carrie, and I hope everyone has a great day.